Every franchise has that one title that is good but is not liked by their own fans, Yakuza 3 being such a title for the Yakuza series. The Sega game is fantastic and well made, the first one to be in HD. It rapidly became the flagship of the series, being remembered simply by the one with the orphanage. What went wrong? I'll tell you soon, but first things first, roll the intro. The Yakuza franchise is beloved by everyone that played it, and slowly but surely it gained traction, becoming a big name in video games. Every entry is someone's favorite, and all have high positive receptions, all except the third one. Yakuza 3 is a good game, don't get me wrong, but it is often the fans' least favorite. The reasons for the hatred are many, but all come for one singular element that the game misses: rhythm. What do I mean by this? Let's start with the main story, and it will be clearer. Before we start, I do want to remind you this is a spoiler-free review. There will be some explanations on how the story develops, but without mentioning specific events nor characters. If you wish to blind run the game, of course I suggest you to watch this video later. Don't worry, I'll wait. Alright, I'm sick of waiting, let's start! To explain how the plot of the game has a fundamental element of rhythm missing, I will do a fast synopsis. Yakuza 3 takes place some months after Yakuza 2, and it's mainly set 1000 kilometers away from Kamurocho, in the Japanese province of Okinawa, Japan's Hawaii. Here, Kiryu does what every monster would do, run an orphanage. But of course, just like every inch of this country, this land has a greater purpose and everyone wants it, needs it, from politicians to gangs to unknown criminals. The rest, of course, is for you to experience. Even if the orphanage is just a pretext for the whole plot of the game, you spend way too much time in it, like a third of your adventure. You do what normally should be side missions as a main quest, helping Chinra around for 9 hours. You don't get to do anything particularly exciting, just the usual talk to somebody or chill around. The pace is tediously slow, and since you're incentivized to do secondary quests too, the whole act is even slower. Once you start unwrapping the mystery, the plot picks up steam. In fact, I would argue that's it way too fast. There are 2 sessions in the main adventure where you literally sit and listen to all events being explained all at once. Of course, I'm not going to reveal what is said and who says it, but all the major questions you have are answered after reading subtitles for like an hour. It feels like a burnout, and as a consequence, all the remaining reveals feel slower than they should be. As you may have noticed, the critique I made was not about the plot itself, since I think the plot is overall strong, but about the rhythm, the flow of the plot. In some parts of the game, you go in slow motion, while in other parts of your adventure you feel you're finishing the game too quickly. Having a gear shift while narrating a story can be done well, but going from 20 to 200 to 20 multiple times makes the ride too bumpy. Now, if you play other Yakuza games in general, you may be confused by my logic. How can I complain that Yakuza 3 is changing gear too often if in other games you can literally go bowling while the whole city is at war? The answer is simple: I choose when to stop the main quest. In Y3, not only you are forced to do these sub-stories in your main, but you also indeed have sub-stories to do. When I was in Okinawa for the first half of the game, I didn't do many subs at all, since I felt I already did enough fooling around in the main story. Furthermore, after listening to a condensed summary of what's going on, when you're going full speed, you don't want to stop, do you? I really want to remark one thing. The plot of the game is not bad. There are some details that could have been more fleshed out, but in general the main is well written. The problem is that the momentum is either broken or gets out of hand too often, making the overall experience less pleasant. When you will play the game, or if you already did, then you will understand this point very clearly. As stated earlier in the video, Yakuza 3 was the first HD game in the franchise. The series went from this to this. Not half bad. Of course, this jump of quality was achieved by changing engines and thus basically making a new game from scratch, just like Yakuza 6 and Kiwami 2 did in 2018. Why am I telling you this? Well, because let's just say that the first time you try something new, it doesn't always go flawlessly. Unfortunately, there is no good way to say this. The gameplay of Yakuza 3 is universally considered to be the weakest out of all the Yakuza games. Again, the game is great by itself, and keep in mind it was originally released 10 years ago, but even when the game came out, the game was not welcomed. As you may have guessed by my premise, the problem is once again the lack of rhythm, of tempo, within the game. Let's address the elephant in the room: blocking. Googling this word next to Yakuza 3, you will get 2 things: complaints and memes, but mostly memes. Unlike other titles, enemies in Yakuza 3 block every single attack you give to them, either until you finish your combo or by grabbing them. Either way, combats become much more tedious, slower, and just less fun than it is in other games. To add insult to injury, enemies are not easily avoidable, meaning that you are forced to fight them while roaming around the city. As you may have guessed, the problem is not the fighting itself, like the moves, the hit actions or the combos, but the break of flow that occurs within the conflict. If we look at other Yakuza games like Zero Kiwami, it is clear that the franchise adopted a much more fluid combat system, even if they make the game easier. Yakuza games are not known for their difficulty. I mean, the new one is not even a fighting game. So making this game artificially harder by increasing the length of battles does not make the game fun. We have consolidated the idea that rhythm is the main problem Yakuza 3 has. But would this problem be solved with a remake, a potential Kiwami 3? In the remastered version for PlayStation 4 and PC, the one I played, the plot and the fightings were kept fully intact, since it was basically just a graphic upscaling. Should the studio remake Yakuza 3 with the new engine? Personally, I think it would have been a waste of time to remake the game, since, at the end of the day, the game is still playable. Rhythm is surely the biggest problem in Yakuza 3, but making a whole remake for the combat would have been overkill, and frankly too much development time taken away. Besides, adjusting the plot is an extremely delicate task, especially for a game that is literally in the middle of a franchise. What could you realistically do? Cut down the slow plot and expand the rest in a way that fits the already established narrative? That would have been quite next to impossible. There are many games that were ruined by that one mechanic or scandal, and unfortunately, rhythm was such an element for Yakuza 3. The game is fantastic, and I'm very happy that it was finally ported to PC, together with the rest of the franchise. But you do have to recognize that the game is a bit flawed, and is most likely one of the weakest Yakuza games I've ever played. If it was not for the rhythm, I believe Yakuza 3 would have been a much more appreciated title, and the positive changes it brought up would have been much more noticed. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments. As usual, I cannot stress this enough. I wish to thank you a gazillion and more for watching today's video. If you like today's topic, leave this video a like and subscribe for more. Do you wish to see more Yakuza in this channel, or more review-ish type of content in general? Let me know down in the comments. But until then, arrivederci.